college football playoff rankings version 1 of the 2025 season have dropped tonight. The top 6 are all SEC Big Ten, which, as we know, means crippling amounts of bias in this thing. Sarcasm. But there are 3 Big 12 teams in the top 13, and that, to me, is the biggest news item here so far, because I was being told as recently as this week, Big 12, one bid league. Did you tell the committee that? Now, the ACC may very well be a one bid league, but Josh, they've got 5 teams in the top 25. Yes, the highest ranked team is 14th, though, and it's Virginia. And then there's Louisville at 15. Georgia Tech's at 17. More on them in a second. Miami's at 18. Fairly shocking to me. I got to be honest with you. I didn't think they'd be that low. And then you've got Pitt down there at 24. So what was the big thing? Remember all the way back in March, all the way back in the spring, the big thing about the playoff committee was they were going to overhaul the criteria. And I just kept sitting here and I kept on saying, we'll see. We'll see. You're going to take strength of schedule more seriously. You're going to take record strength more seriously. So seriously, you're going to invent a new metric, record strength, which is basically how you give someone credit for beating really good teams and you minimize the penalty for losing against really good teams. And you also minimize the reward for beating bad teams, which means if you schedule up and you lose, it's not the end of the world. And if you load up on cream puffs and you win, it's not a guarantee that you're going to make it. It sounds great. I'm all for it. I told you at the time, I'm all for it. Let's see it put in practice. Well, this is the first glimpse that we get of how it's going to be put in practice. So I was watching the rankings release earlier tonight, and I heard McElroy say something that I agreed with. I thought Georgia Tech was maybe the most important team in this whole thing because Georgia Tech's schedule is trash. But they've won every game they've played except one. They just lost their first game last week. So this time last year, the committee would probably have them top 10 or somewhere near the top 10. So if you're going to take strength of record and schedule metrics a little more seriously or a lot more seriously this year, you needed to see Georgia Tech outside the top 15. It's no knock against them. It's nothing personal against them. I've been Mr. Georgia Tech the whole year. But if we remove the logo and my affinity for the program, Georgia Tech shouldn't be in the top 15. Well, there they were, all the way down at 17. That's fair. That's okay. Iowa at 20th, I thought was another little blinking red light, just a little bit, about the inverse, the opposite side of that coin. See, Iowa's got 2 losses, but one of those losses is to Iowa State. That was a tough game on the road, rivalry game early in the year. We were there for that one. And the other one we weren't there for, it was the Indiana game. Indiana's number 2 right now. I got no problem with that. Iowa played them closer than anyone has. Iowa, what was it, a 5-point game, Jesse? Iowa played them to within 1 possession. So, according to record strength metrics, which is a new bit of criteria in the equation this year, part of record strength is how well do you do against your schedule. It's very simple. And part of that is we're going to minimize the penalty for losing competitive games to really good teams. So Iowa lost a competitive game to a really good Indiana team. Well, there they are. They're sitting there number 20. Now, that compared to the AP, where the Iowa Hawkeyes are unranked, is very notable to me because that shows the committee maybe changing their viewpoint up a little bit from just this group over here that only cares what your win-loss record is, a.k.a. the AP, a.k.a. what the committee largely thought like as recently as last year. So the other thing that I think a bunch of people had their eye on, me included, was how Miami and Notre Dame compared in the first rankings release. Because what do we have on the surface? Well, we got a couple of 2-loss teams, and they've played on a field already this year. Not a neutral field, but they played already this year, and Miami won. All right, so you just kind of say it out loud. All right, are their records the same? Yes. Have they played? Yes. What was the outcome? Miami won the game. Okay, Miami should be ranked higher. That was that was one lane of logic going into this. Not even close. Not even close. Not only is Notre Dame ahead of Miami, Notre Dame was 10th tonight. Miami was 18th. It turns out Notre Dame would have to lose a 3rd game to come close to dropping beneath Miami, and this surprised me. I'm not shocked that Notre Dame was above them. I am shocked Miami is that low. I almost feel like the committee's a little pissed off at Miami because you believe in them and you're ready to rank them high, and they do what they did against Louisville, then they do again what they did against SMU. And I don't know how to explain this. I don't know how to quantify this. I feel like some people for instance, in the prediction world, like if I predict Miami to win the ACC in the preseason, or let's say I tweet out, hey, Miami looks different than any team in the country, and then they lay a couple of eggs, it makes me look like an idiot. So then if I'm ranking them, I could just like grip my pencil hard and bump them way down because I'm punishing them because they didn't fulfill on my expectation. Now, that's not supposed to be part of this equation. The only way I can make sense of this is I really think some committee members looked at Miami and said, shame on you. We had higher expectations for you in the preseason than we did for a Vandy or a Georgia Tech or a Virginia or whatnot. So we're going to bump you down a little bit further, because you're just not playing up to your potential. Well, that's not really part of the equation. And so Miami, look, I got no problem with them not being top 10, but they're not top 15 either. They're 18th. And I don't really know what their road back is because ironically, their best win is Notre Dame. And for a while, it was thought that Miami would be a barrier to entry for Notre Dame because the thinking was, all right, if they're going to have the same record and there's a head-to-head result, Notre Dame can't go any higher than Miami is. That was just blown out of the water in the first version by the committee. And I was listening to a lot of the talk on the set there, and they're right in what they said. It's very, very clear that the committee valued their eyeball test. And the committee also valued the trajectory of these teams. One of them seems to be headed up. The other seems to be headed down. I couldn't care less about that. If Miami's headed down, then they'll keep losing games, and at that point, you can punish them. And if Notre Dame's headed up, they'll continue to win games. And at that point, you can reward them. I really couldn't care less. And this goes for me, too. If I were on the committee, I don't care what I think a team's trajectory is. That's for the future to decide. That's for them to decide on the field. What I'm supposed to be going by is the here and now. And so, it'd be one thing, too, if like Notre Dame had loaded up on great wins. Because I'm not a you are what your record says you are guy. I'm not all about just the wins and losses, but their best win is against USC, which is a very good win. But then again, Miami's best win is against you. So anyway, that surprised me a little bit. I'm not sitting here stumping for Miami too hard because they've had just these inexplicable performances, and they don't really deserve a whole lot of credit right now. I also just think they deserve maybe to be a little higher than 18. Also, and I don't ever hear them talk about this, could it be that early games are weighted differently? This is not an official part of the playoff committee criteria, yet we see it borne out every year. It's just like widely understood that if you lose early, you're punished less than if you lose late. But it's not written, as far as I know, it's not written into the committee protocol. All right, look at Oregon there. Oregon's at number 9. Do you think Oregon is in an interesting spot? Oregon is 3 spots below what they are in the AP poll in the committee rankings. Kind of the opposite of Iowa. Iowa's higher than they are in the AP, and Oregon is lower than what they are in the AP. Now, if Oregon wins out, that doesn't mean anything. Hey, wait just a second. I appreciate you guys watching. Most of you are subscribed. If you're not, please do so. It's free. It helps us keep the show free, and that's how we do college football year round. All right, back to the video. Let's just walk through a scenario right quick. Let's say Oregon goes on the road and wins Saturday. Not going to be easy. They're a 6.5-point favorite at Iowa. The forecast is horrendous. Weather forecast is horrendous for that game. More on that later in the show. But let's say they go win. And then they win against Minnesota. But they lose to either USC or Washington. So they're a 10-2 team. What's the best win? The best win will have been at Iowa, maybe, either one of these games, USC or at Washington. Those may or may not be ranked teams at the end of the year. My point here is that game right there, that Penn State game, was supposed to be their crowning achievement. That win on the road at Penn State was supposed to be the one Oregon could hang their hat on. And so if they got on bubble alert and they were being compared against 2-loss teams or maybe even some 3-loss Oklahoma that's got multiple quality wins, it was all going to be fine because Oregon, even if, God forbid, they lose 2 games, as long as they win that Penn State game, they're good. That may not be the case here. That may not be the case. Now, it would take some of their remaining scheduled teams losing some games for them to not have any ranked wins. But there is a world where Oregon goes 10-2 and they don't have any ranked wins. And this is what really, really angers me about this stuff, because every single year we get to the end of the road and there's a team that I think has a real quality win that is not being counted as a quality win. And this year, that quality win could very well be Oregon on the road at Penn State, because people are going to look and they're going to say, wow, Penn State ended up losing, like 5 games or something like that. That was a bad team. Penn State got killed by Oregon. Penn State's season got killed by Oregon. You will never convince me, if Penn State wins that game in overtime, that they then go on to lose to UCLA and Northwestern the next couple of weeks. There's no way that would have happened. I don't even think anyone who hates Oregon disagrees with me there. So my question is always, if Penn State only ended up being a dead team because Oregon killed them, then they weren't a dead team when Oregon played them, in Happy Valley no less, in a whiteout. And so if that's the case, why wouldn't I give Oregon the kind of credit you would give a team for beating someone in the top 15 on the road, instead of retroactively removing credit because of what they inflicted on that team? I've always thought that way. So I've always been of the opinion that you should semi-crystallize the value of a game, whether it's a win or a loss, when it happens. And only rarely should you go back and redefine it. In most cases, the only time you should be going back and redefining the value or lack thereof of a win is if you beat someone early in the year that everyone thinks is no good, but then they end up being like 10-2. So you didn't get credit early on, and then they made a run, and you look back and say, whoa, you remember when A defeated B in week 2 and no one talked about it? Turns out that was a really good win. If that's the case, I don't care about retroactively adding credit, but I'm very careful about retroactively removing credit. Now, that doesn't mean that's a blanket policy. Give you a perfect example. Last year, Georgia Tech beat Florida State in week 1. FSU was preseason top 10. Okay, then everybody beat Florida State. And it wasn't just because Georgia Tech killed them. So this was not an Oregon-Penn State situation. So yeah, in retrospect, no, I'm not really giving Georgia Tech the kind of credit you would give for beating a top 10 team on a neutral site. Yes, there are exceptions, but my general rule is I've got a lot of issues with people going back and nitpicking and removing credit, in large part because what happened to a team from that point forward may have a lot to do with what you put on them that night. So that's always been a problem I've had. Utah at 13 is a big deal. I mean, the Big 12 having 3 in the top 13 screams to me that may very well be a 2-bid league. Number 7 plays number 8 this Saturday. We will be there on the sidelines in Lubbock, Texas. I always slip that in because I'm very proud that we get to go to the biggest game in the country every week. But Utah at 13 kind of matches up with what I've been telling you. The model keeps picking up on that. We've got Utah power rated as the best team in the Big 12. Not that that matters. That's not what this should be. I'm not going to go over the whole rankings versus ratings thing. I'm just saying that to say people left Utah for dead after they lost the Brigham Young game. And it may be that in the Big 12 title race, maybe they're on the outside looking in. There's no maybe. They are on the outside looking in. But unlike the popular thinking a couple of weeks ago, which was you either need to win the Big 12 or lose in the conference title game to hopefully get a spot, Utah could just straight up be an at-large team. Utah could do what like Georgia may do. Georgia doesn't need to play in Atlanta to make the playoff. Oregon doesn't need to play in Indy to make the playoff. You're used to thinking that way in the SEC and the Big Ten. Utah may end up thinking that way. And I'm telling you right now, if Utah gets in the playoff, Utah's going to be a very dangerous team. So, Texas OU 11-12. What you think about that? The live chat is up in arms about it. I saw a lot of people saying, oh, Texas at 11 is laughable. Listen to me. Listen, everyone listening. If it's laughable, you don't have to worry about it. I assume by saying Texas at 11 is laughable means you don't think that they're really deserving of the number 11 spot. That's okay. That's fine. Need I remind you, Texas still goes on the road to play number 5, and they play number 3 at home to end the year. So if Texas is a fraud, Texas will be exposed. I have a question for you. just like I have for OU at 12. OU has to go on the road to play number 4 in a couple of weeks. I forget the rest of Oklahoma's schedule. It's not easy. My question is, as it was in the spring, how likely is it that a 3-loss SEC team makes it into the playoff? I think the default answer is always unlikely until proven otherwise. But we got a couple of 2-loss SEC teams right here at 11 and 12. Texas is over OU because of the head-to-head, I assume, which is fair. So let's say Texas right there. They're number 11 already. Let's say they were to go on the road, beat Georgia in Athens next week. That would bump them up, I assume, Jesse, well into the top 10. And what if their last action in the season is a close loss on the road, in Austin to Texas A&M, an undefeated A&M? Like, what if that's their last loss? And the committee is sitting here steadily telling us, going into that last weekend, Texas is in the top 10, and we're valuing record strength, which minimizes punishment for losses to elite teams. And let's say Texas is like number 7, and they lose 24-21 to A&M. Are they dropping out because they're a 3-loss team? That's my question. Just like with OU. Give me OU's schedule right quick, Bradley. So Oklahoma right now is a 2-loss team. Let's say they go to Tuscaloosa next weekend, lose 27-24. And then their final 2 actions are to beat Missouri and to beat LSU. And so they're a 3-loss team. Where are they? Kind of depends on where Texas is, I would assume. I think the Texas may be the more likely scenario at the moment. Texas making the playoff out of those 2 being a 3-loss pair is the more likely, but each of them could lose to a top 5 team on the road. Like that, they're sitting on the bubble supposedly right now. Each of them, their only additional loss, like there's a scenario where their additional loss is a top 5 road loss. That could happen. So I don't think the door is slammed on. I think the door is wide open on 2 Big 12 teams. I don't think the door is slammed on a 3-loss SEC team making it in here. I'm very curious about how the committee will treat a 10-2 Oregon, especially depending on how Washington and USC play the rest of the year. I don't know what Miami's path is right now. They just need to go win a bunch of games. That's their path. But that whole Notre Dame-Miami thing's a little interesting. Look, not an egregious set of rankings here at all. I actually think they did a halfway decent job. But long way to go. November, longest month of the year, long way to go.